Everybody, we are getting you ready for your fantasy football drafts that are right around the corner. Today we're going to be looking at the running back position. We just looked at the quarterbacks yesterday. Today I want to take a closer look at the running backs. If you have the number one pick in the draft, you need to take Christian McCaffrey. I wouldn't even give it a second thought. But I think the number one thing to think about this year is that there aren't a ton of workhorse running backs. So I think it's important to definitely in the first two rounds, you cannot leave round two without having a running back. You have to have one at least. And if you feel like you can find receiver quality later on, maybe even consider taking two, because after you get outside of McCaffrey, Barkley, Kamara, Elliott, and maybe a couple others, Dalvin Cook, Kenyan Drake, after that, there really are no running backs that you can for sure say are going to be workhorse backs and are going to get you a lot of points and touches each week. So I think in the first round, unless Michael Thomas is sitting there at like the fourth or fifth pick, or really all the running backs are gone, I think you really need to consider drafting a running back with your first pick and possibly even with your second pick as well. Because there aren't a ton of for sure things at the running back position this year. Last year, though, it was a pretty healthy year for running backs. We didn't have a lot of injuries. But I think that's something we also have to take into account. But at the top, Christian McCaffrey, of course, number one running back. Right behind him is Saquon Barkley. I think he has RB1 overall potential. But injury is still a concern with him. And the Giants' offensive line. Let's see what happens there. That wasn't good last year. They did draft Andrew Thomas fourth overall, and they may reshuffle the line a little bit, may move Nate Solder to the right side. We'll see if that works. But Barkley, I think, is definitely your number two pick. I think if you can get the number one or number two pick in your draft, you're saying pretty well. You can come back at the end of the second round, pretty much have your choice of positions. You can go tight end if Kelsey or Kittle is available. You could even consider a quarterback, Lamar Jackson or Patrick Mahomes. And then, there could be a receiver that falls, Julio Jones, or you get into that range. And even a Cooper Kupp there wouldn't be awful value. We'll get into the receivers more in the next video. But after that, I think there is a drop-off with the running backs. Ezekiel, Elliott, and Alvin Kamara, I'm kind of have them. They're kind of tied in my rankings. Elliott is boom or bust to me. Under Mike McCarthy systems, I mentioned it in the other video and stuff, the Green Bay teams that under Mike McCarthy, they never ran the ball. So that scares me, especially since they brought in another receiver, CeeDee Lamb. So they have three receivers that have potential to become wide receiver ones. Amari Cooper already is. Gallup's definitely a number two now. So now you have CeeDee Lamb in the slot, who has potential to be a wide receiver one. A lot of people thought he was the best receiver in the draft this year. So Elliott, I'm just wondering how many touches he will actually get. Plus, they're losing Travis Frederick, their outstanding center. They did bring in Tyler Biadasz in the fifth round of the draft this year. I think he's a pretty good run-blocking center for the future. But I don't know how much he's going to contribute immediately. He had some injury problems at Wisconsin. So I'd be a little bit hesitant to draft Elliott. If he's there with the fifth pick, I think that's solid. But I don't think he's going to be getting you 30 touches a game. Now, you could say that, he's not going to be going against the stacked box anymore like he was a year or two ago. But now the bigger concern is the touches. How much is he going to be involved in the passing game? I just don't trust Mike McCarthy's offense. We'll see what happens. But Alvin Kamara's right there as well. His numbers went down a little bit last year, at least with touchdowns. I think that goes back up to 10 or so touchdowns this year. I think we'll see what happens with New Orleans, everything that's going on with Drew Brees and his comments and stuff. Seems like the locker room's forgiving him for what he said, what they did not like about what he said. I think that Kamara is a safe play in the middle of the first round. I don't know if he has any chance of surpassing Barkley or McCaffrey barring injury. I think his ceiling is limited to RB3 overall, just because of the offensive line's still there, but you brought in Emmanuel Sanders. You still have Michael Thomas. They're going to be throwing the ball a lot. Plus, they have Tom Brady in that division and stuff. They're playing a lot of teams in that division that have really good offenses. So they're going to be throwing the ball a lot and stuff, especially if they get behind early in games. Their defense really isn't that great this year. At least it doesn't look like it's going to be on paper. Consider Kamara if you're in the middle of the first round, but I wouldn't reach for him with the second or third pick. I don't think he's really worth it. After that, I think we have another drop-off. But then you're getting into the younger guys that could become the elite guys next year. Looking at Joe Mixon, running back from Cincinnati. I'm not sure if he's going to hold out or not because of a contract dispute. But you have him. You have Dalvin Cook, who's had an amazing year last year. Some people think he's going to be better in Gary Kubiak's offense this year. We'll see what happens. I'm still worried about his injury concerns. The Minnesota offensive line should be better this year a little bit. Austin Eckler, not on this year just because new quarterback Justin Herbert. Not a big fan of the Chargers offense. Derrick Henry, I'm also not super high on just because he's not going to get you points as a receiver. And they did lose Jack Conklin at right tackle. I do like the guy that brought in Isaiah Wilson in the first round of the draft, but I would not take Derrick Henry in the first round. I don't think he's gonna have quite the year that he had last year. You're gonna have to pray that he gets you some touchdowns this year. I don't think he's gonna be going against the stack box, and we still don't know how dominant that offensive line is gonna be without Jack Conklin. So I'd hold off on Henry until the second round. Kenyan Drake, probably the same thing. I think there's more upside with Drake just because he's found the system that all of us fantasy owners were hoping he'd find for several years and stuff. Miami didn't help him. Adam Gase's offense didn't help him any. So a change of scenery really helped him. Cliff Kingsbury's offense is perfect for him. After that, Leonard Fournette, if you think he's going to be traded during the year and you think he's going to be traded to a good team, maybe you take that chance and then you have him for the postseason. But there's so much uncertainty there. Plus, Jacksonville is going to be losing almost every game, in my opinion. So they're going to be throwing the ball a lot. So I would stay away from that. Miles Sanders, we'll see if Philly brings in another running back. I know they wanted Carlos Hyde. Maybe they bring in Devontae Freeman or LaShawn McCoy, someone to take a few carries away from Sanders. Philly's never been one to have one running back. They like doing more of a committee. We'll see what happens. Aaron Jones, his touchdowns are going to go down. I think we all know that his touchdowns are going to go down. But still, I think he's a good round 3, round 4 value if you can get him there. But the drafting of A.J. Dillon hurts his draft stock some. Plus, they still have Jamal Williams. They're going to be running the ball a lot. Plus, it sounds crazy for a team that's led by Aaron Rodgers, but they may be stacking the box against a team that has Aaron Rodgers at quarterback. They just don't have any weapons outside Devontae Adams. Maybe Allen Lazard breaks onto the scene. We'll cover him in the wide receiver video, probably. But moving on, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, I think I wasn't a huge fan of him coming out. He was like my number 5 running back in the draft this year. Didn't love him, but Kansas City's offense is perfect for this guy. I think he's going to be really good at a couple years down the line. Not sure how much of a role he's going to have this year. Damian Williams is still there, of course. I think that since they drafted him in the first round, they are going to try to get him going early and often. But you have to pick and choose with Kansas City's offense who you really think is going to be the top guys. You can't just draft your entire roster of Kansas City guys. Pick and choose who you want. If you're investing in the passing game, I would take off of that. And I know Edwards-Helaire is a good pass-catching running back, but they still have Damian Williams there, don't forget. And he could have been easily the Super Bowl MVP. So let's just keep that in mind. Jonathan Taylor, another rookie running back. A lot of people think he's going to take off with a good offensive line that Indianapolis has. But again, Frank Reich coming from Philly, they like the committee backfield. And Marlon Mack had a really nice year last year. And Naheem Hines has been spoken highly of as a guy who can maybe get 10 receptions out of the backfield a game. So I don't think I've seen him in some mock drafts that I've been in. He's going like 3rd round and stuff. To me, I mean, his numbers by the end of the year, it may end up being an okay pick in the 3rd round. But I think you can get him later in most leagues, so I'd wait. if you're in NFL.com league, you may be able to wait until like the 10th round. I think they're going to fix their rankings. But I was in a mock the other day, got him really late. But I wouldn't take him higher. I wouldn't take him higher than the 3rd or 4th round. I think that's a little bit too high for him. Once you get into the 5th, 6th round, that's probably pretty good value if you have a running back already that is a workhorse and you're confident in, because we still don't know what his workload is going to be in his rookie year. David Montgomery and Todd Gurley. Montgomery, I'm not sold on the Bears this year with Nick Foles. Never been a huge Nick Foles fan. I think I'm interested to see if they decide to give Trubisky another shot if Foles struggles, but it looks like it is Foles' job. Maybe that opens up the offense for Montgomery. But to me, Montgomery isn't a good fit in Chicago. I was hoping they'd draft Darryl Henderson last year, which Darryl Henderson is a guy you really need to focus on in the preseason. See who is getting more snaps. See who seems to have the leg up in training camp between Henderson and Cam Akers. I'm more on the Henderson train, but I would say the majority of people have Akers as a 5th or 6th round pick, so obviously they think he's going to get the majority of the carries, but only time will tell. Todd Gurley and Le'Veon Bell, two guys that used to be fantasy studs. Now we're not really sure where to put them. With Gurley, I think if you can get him at the end of round 5, that's probably okay value. But I don't love Gurley. I never have been a huge Todd Gurley fan. You have to worry about his knee concerns with the arthritis. The offensive line should be better for Atlanta this year with McGarry and Lindstrom, guys they brought in last year in the draft. Hopefully they develop. And they have 11 first-round picks on Falcons offense. Pretty much their entire offense is first-round picks. So Gurley has a lot of talent around him. So keep an eye on the Falcons offense, but I think that's going to be a passing division with Tampa Bay and New Orleans and stuff. So I don't know how many touches Gurley's really going to get, even though he is the clear-cut number 1 there. Plus you have to worry about the injury. Le'Veon Bell, I've always liked Le'Veon. They did improve the offensive line, but I'm still not sure with Adam Gase's offense what his ceiling really is. Running backs, receivers, anyone really has stunk in Adam Gase's system pretty much everywhere he's been, unless you're Brock Osweiler or Jay Cutler. So if you're Le'Veon Bell lover, maybe 4th round. That would probably be the highest I'd say is good, at least right now. He still doesn't seem happy. Gase doesn't seem to want him. There still seems to be some turmoil there in New York, so just keep an eye on that. Then David Johnson, another fantasy stud from a few years back. I'm not buying into I'm not going to draft him ahead of maybe the 7th round. I don't think that Houston's going to be able to run the ball and stuff. If anyone gets rushing yards, it's going to be Deshaun Watson. I don't trust Bill O'Brien's offense anymore. Maybe if you want to invest in Duke Johnson as a late rounder, maybe you can take that chance. But David Johnson, I don't think he's going to be an elite running back. His ceiling is an RB2 on a roster, but he's probably going to end up being more of a flex starter if he stays healthy. And maybe he can get you 10 to 12 points a week, but I wouldn't expect anything spectacular from him. Finish things off, Chris Carson, James Conner, Mark Ingram are all guys I'm saying hold off on. New running backs have been brought in. Their workloads aren't going to be as high, and none of them are fantastic receivers out of the backfield. So back off on those 3. Melvin Gordon, that's another one we have to watch. He's always going to get you some touchdowns, but Phillip Lindsey is a really good running back as well. So keep an eye on that. Then we have more rookies, DeAndre Swift, Zach Moss. He's a sleeper you can keep an eye on in the later rounds. I really think he could have a good year. But at the start of the year, it is going to be probably Devin Singletary's job. And he did have a really nice year last year and was really good for fantasy owners. But other than that, I'd say back off on a lot of the committees in the middle rounds. Kareem Hunt, I'm saying hold off until 7th round, then maybe consider him just in case Nick Chubb gets injured. But I still don't know what his ceiling is going to be. Nick Chubb was so good last year. And the offense with Kevin Stefanski is tailored towards Nick Chubb in a power running scheme. So Keyshawn Vaughn is another rookie. Keep an eye on. And then guys that have lost their starting roles, Kerryon Johnson, if he could stay healthy, he could still take carries away from DeAndre Swift. He could still be that number one running back. But keep an eye on the Detroit Lions running game. Keep an eye on Marlon Mack. We already touched on Jonathan Taylor and Nyheim Hines. Marlon Mack did have a really good year last year, and I think at the start of the year they are still going to be committed to him as the running back one. I just don't think they're going to sign him long term. So I think at the start of the year you get good value from him, but if Jonathan Taylor starts to succeed in the touches that he gets, I think Mack's role is going to slowly decrease. But if you can get him later in the draft, 13th round or so, that could end up being really good value for you. Sony Michel, with New England, I'm not sold on the New England running game. I don't really know what to expect from Jarrett Stidham. I liked him coming out of Auburn, but I'm a little bit hesitant about their offense as a whole. Ronald Jones, another guy to keep an eye on. He hasn't been able to find his rhythm in the offense. I'm going to say, since they drafted Keyshawn Vaughn in the 3rd round, I'm saying stay away from the Buccaneers running game. With pretty much any NFC South running game outside of it, Carolina's with Christian McCaffrey, I'd say don't buy into too much. So with Ronald Jones, he can't catch out of the backfield. Tampa Bay doesn't seem to be a great system for him. So I'd be a little bit hesitant. And then another committee to keep an eye on is Jordan Howard and Matt Breida. How are they going to split the carries there? If Jordan Howard can get a leg up and can become the running back he was a couple years ago with Chicago, he could be a fantasy steal, because right now you're getting him in like the 8th, 9th, even 10th round. These are just all guys to keep an eye on in the middle rounds, but not to buy into too much because their roles are going to be limited. Darius Geis, I'm not into just because he's always injured. I don't know if he can stay healthy for a full year, so he's one guy I should say avoid. And then another guy to keep an eye on later in the draft, I mentioned Zach Moss. And don't leave out Alexander Madison. If something happens to Dalvin Cook, we talked about his injury problems. Alexander Madison looked really good last year. So keep an eye on him. Maybe you can get him in the later rounds. If you draft Dalvin Cook, maybe you want to handcuff him with Madison. It may not be a bad idea at all. Michael Fabiano talks about handcuffs a lot, and that's something he likes to do with those running backs. And sometimes it does work out. So those are some things to keep an eye on when you are looking to draft your running backs this year. That is all for this time. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe. Next time, we'll be looking at the wide receivers.